They do have their place, but I truly believe the planet and nature can provide a lot of healing for our bodies naturally. If we can give the body the right things and the right time, it does want to heal, and it has lots of healing properties and buttons or triggers inside of it that can be turned on to heal and survive.
Welcome back to the Quantum Lens podcast. And I'm so excited to have Jackie, the founder of the company Equisol. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Jackie.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we have been recently acquainted, and so we've been speaking for the last few months, and I'm so excited about your company. I didn't know it existed, and I want to spread the awareness about it because I think you're doing such a cool thing. Do you want to just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, I will warn you, I'm kind of like a very detailed, long-winded person, but I will do my best to keep it short for, the hour-long podcast. So my professional day job has been a equine and canine body worker for the last 15 years. And if most people don't know what that is, it's basically like being like a physical therapist for animals. So I do massage work, craniosacral, myofascial release, stretching. If there's rehab cases with injuries, we work with those and come up with like a rehab protocol. I have worked on horses and dogs, but I would say the primary patient and client of mine are all horses. They kind of filled up the docket of my schedule, and I just love them to death. And so they fill up my time. So that's been my primary experiences with horses, but all four-legged animals kind of have a lot of the same patterns and conformation patterns and dysfunctional compensation patterns. And especially for horses, because they get ridden. Our cats and dogs don't get ridden. So there's a lot more pressure and compensation that is asked of the horse in their jobs. And so I've done that for the last 15 years of my own business, have a degree from Midway University in equine health and rehabilitation, and love the job, very rewarding, love learning it, how the whole body works biomechanically, under pressures, under compensations. I, sit at Walmarts and airports and watch everybody walk and move and see how the different patterns are stuck in bodies. It's just really fun. It's kind of like a puzzle. Especially with horses, because they can't verbally talk to us, right? Or dogs, they can't verbally tell us what's going on. So you have to watch how they're moving and then really try to figure out what's going on in their bodies. And now when we talk about like the quantum perspective, which I know we'll get into, you're truly looking at like the whole environment and the whole body on top of that, of like how the environment is actually influencing the health of that whole body of the animal. And so about 5 years ago, while I was doing my job and working on horses, I came down with Lyme disease from a tick bite. And because of the business and industry that I'm in and the kind of work I do, I already had a much more holistic, natural mindset to healing. Not that I'm against like pharmaceuticals completely. They do have their place, but I truly believe the planet and nature can provide a lot of healing for our bodies naturally. If we can give the body the right things and the right time, it does want to heal, and it has lots of healing properties and buttons or triggers inside of it that can be turned on to heal and survive. And so I really wanted to go the route of healing my Lyme disease naturally, especially because when I first was going to my doctor about it, in our modern medical protocols, the only thing they want to give you is antibiotics for 3 months straight. And at the time I was 35, and I'd probably had a couple of rounds of antibiotics my whole entire life. And I already knew, enough about kind of the gut microbiome and things like that at that time that I was like, 3 months of antibiotics is going to wreck my gut. What am I going to have to deal with, even if that kills the Lyme disease? And so I kind of started doing some research before I accepted the prescription. And I went back to my doctor when I was supposed to get the prescription from her. And I just had more questions. Luckily, I've always been a curious little animal. And so I was like, well, look, if I take the antibiotics for 3 months and we come back and retest and I still have Lyme disease, then what do we do? And she's like, oh, we just give you 3 more months of antibiotics. And I was like, so that doesn't work.
Right.
And by then I had found Dr. Buhner's herbal protocols. He is like this, well, he was, we lost him 2 years ago, but like a wizard of an herbalist. And he actually had found lots of plants and different tinctures and protocols to help the Lyme population of people. He had all kinds of books for other things too, viruses and things, but he was one of the herbalists that was really able to help the Lyme community a lot. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try the natural route first because then again, like if it doesn't work, I can always go back to the antibiotics if I need to. And so I didn't take the prescription and I went ahead and did the natural herbs and tinctures from his protocol for actually did it for 6 months instead of three, just to kind of be sure. But even at that 3 month mark of retesting, my Lyme had went to negative, and it was healing. And so I did actually end up healing the Lyme disease naturally. Uh, but I was left with a bunch of symptoms afterwards where my body was still just not functioning optimally, especially for a 35-year-old. I worked out and rode horses and thought that I spent a lot of good time outside and ate paleo and all those things. And so I didn't know why I wasn't still recovering, even though I had technically healed Lyme disease. So, libido was still on the floor, brain still wasn't really functioning optimally. I wasn't recovering from workouts, sluggish, just all those things. And when we did the blood work, even though the Lyme was negative, everything else was on the floor. So cortisol levels, thyroid levels, hormone levels. And again, at 36, my doctor wanted to be like, oh, well, we're just going to put you on hormone replacements and you're going to be on them for the rest of your life. And I was like,
Right.
no, I don't think I'm going to sign up for that either. I'm only 36. And so I left her office and kind of just started digging. And I have a good friend, Jim Laird. He's in our quantum community as well. And he had just come across Dr. Jack Cruz's information. And so he was like, look, I think you should look into this. We had the exercise and the walking and the paleo eating and good water. We had all those things right. He was like, but this guy's talking about light and sunshine and quantum. And he's like, I think you should look into it. I think he's got some information on Lyme as well. So I kind of started listening to some podcasts and stuff. Again, I wasn't really able to like retain a lot of good information yet. And the podcast and the stuff talking about nature and sunlight and circadian rhythms and us being animals, like all of it just made so much sense. It's just like a direct gut punch of like honesty and common sense and our primal nature of like, oh yeah, like we're supposed to be outside and light and dark cycles. And we have all these artificial things in our environment like blue light and EMFs and all of that. So I dug down the rabbit hole, started making sense, and I was like, okay, the only two things I decided to try, because again, I was curious, I liked science experiments. I decided I'm going to get up in the morning and walk my dogs at sunrise, first thing before any other light, and I'm going to try my best to make my nights dark, right? I wasn't even perfect at that, but I did get up every day for 30 days and walk the dogs. And within a 2 week period, I already started noticing just more energy and kind of some clearness to my brain and thinking processes. I wasn't having the afternoon slump at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon to want to take a nap or want to lay down and sleep and rest. So those were already improving within 2 weeks. And by the end of the 30 days, I also started noticing that I was getting hungry right after my walk. And I mentioned that because through my whole adult life, I was never somebody that was hungry in the morning. I was surrounded by people that were like, oh, I've got to eat breakfast in the morning. I'm starving. And I was never hungry in the morning, but I was also never getting up and seeing the sun first thing in the morning. And so I was like, there's something to this because if I'm only changing my light in the morning and it has now changed something pretty big physiologically in my body that I haven't had for 30 something years, that's pretty powerful. And so I just continued to kind of let's keep going. It's free. It's just lifestyle changes, right? And I had spent like $10,000 on blood work and supplements and naturopaths and all these things during the Lyme journey. Like I was broke. I was tired of supplements being all over my counter. I was done with all of that. And so really I just started changing things about my light life. And then I did start incorporating some red light therapy as well with panels to just give that extra boost. I didn't understand a whole lot yet about red light therapy, but I was just testing things and it was working. And really within like 6 months, I felt almost back to normal. Within that year's time, definitely back to normal. And then now that it's been 5 years, I mean, my health has just optimized and like become like superhero powers, like I always tell people now, like my brain works like a Ferrari. It's just like boom, 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 boom. I can spit out scientific information. I can recall things. I can talk about, quantum biology and light and talk in front of people. And so that's kind of what happened. I found out how much light was so powerful in helping us and healing us, and it was free and nobody knew, and they're hiding from the sun. And so I got certified in quantum biology, and then I just started teaching locally to like yoga studios and health centers. Whoever would hear me talk about light, I showed up for, farm retreats, things like that. It was a blast. And I think it helped me to get to this point now of where I'll start talking at pet conferences and vet conferences and things like that in the future. But it was amazing because about a year-ish into this journey, I took myself to Mexico to like get some sun during the winter. And I was just sitting on the beach under the sun, and literally like the invention idea of red light therapy products for animals, specifically like a blanket, like a full body treatment, was just like downloaded straight to like my third eye. So beware, I get a little woo for sure. But it's quantum, right?
I love it.
And so it was just like downloaded right there. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I came home and started, researching to see like what existed, what didn't. And I saw an opportunity for sure that there was not something like that for animals. So I started that whole process of, patent filing and manufacturing and design and getting prototypes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to where now we're basically 4.5 years down the road. We launched with our dog blankets in August of last year. We launched with horse leg wraps and bell boots in November. It's been going over really well. We've sold out of our horse products twice already. And I'm very connected to that industry, so it's very easy for me to get there and advertise. And the dog stuff is definitely coming. And then I have a horse blanket in development right now. The last prototype is being shipped to me at the moment for me to just test and make sure everything's like kind of final and good to go. And I hope to release that for sale in August. We also have torches coming and also a cat blanket product as well. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of like who I am, what my background is, and kind of the story that allowed this all to happen from a struggle and from a health diagnosis to come into this like miraculous product, actually, like the healing that we're doing with these products already. Just I always know it's going to work now because of all the research I've read and because of using it on me and other people that I've known have used red light therapy. But sometimes it really still blows my mind at how fast and strong the red light therapy is healing things. It's quite incredible.
I saw this story that you posted about a dog that was like paralyzed. Could you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
Yeah, little Marley, he's definitely my hero story for sure for the company. And I have Kelly Bento, one of our other quantum associates, to thank for that story. It was in Boston and she divinely found him. But yeah, Marley was a little like Yorkshire Terrier mixed dog in Boston, Massachusetts. His mom and owner, Kara, found him walking the streets one time about 2 years ago. He was walking, he was healthy, he was kind of malnourished and stuff from being like a street dog, but she took him in, adopted him. That first year they were together, he loved to walk, he was healthy, she was feeding him good food. And then all of a sudden, after a year of being with her, he like blew up twice his size and then like completely paralyzed. Could not stand up
Wow.
on his own, could not move his legs. His front paws started to like kind of curl in like this. And Kara, bless her heart, like she spent, I think, about $10,000 between like she did all the diagnostic tests you could do, MRIs, CT scan, x-rays, and ultrasounds. And the only thing the vets could find was just inflammation. I think that he was so big in inflammation, they couldn't find whatever the issue was, whether it be a cancerous tumor or a broken bone or a fracture. I will tell what was wrong with him at the end of the story because we did find out. But then she tried all kinds of treatments, both allopathic and natural. So there was like a neurosurgeon vet that injected him with like a spinal injection that's like $1,000 a piece. And she's like, oh, your dog's gonna be walking in a week. Nope.
Oh,
Did another one. Your dog's gonna be walking in a week for sure. Nope. Like not even a minor like advancement in his health. Tried physical therapy, tried acupuncture, tried a couple of things, gabapentin, some nerves, some steroids, things like that. But I mean, you don't want to keep a little dog with all the inflammation on steroids either. And so she got like a custom wheelchair made for him and was wheeling him around everywhere with his life. Her and her mom were hand feeding him. I mean, that's a situation where most people would have just euthanized the dog. And Kara loved him too much and they were just meant to find each other, I believe. And so she was just taking care of him. Well, finally, she went to a second vet for a second opinion and he had a laser. And so they started doing laser treatments on the dog for 30 minutes, only on the neck. The vet wanted her to come 3 days a week because when you're using light, you need a lot of it. But it was $250 for a 30-minute session on the neck.
wow.
So she decided to give it just the month because that's all she could afford. So $1,000 and went once a week. And she did. It was the only treatment that she started seeing differences. Like his little paws up front started to just uncurl. But that was it. That's all she saw within those 4 sessions. And she couldn't afford any more sessions after that. Well, about 30 days or 45 days after that, Kelly ran into her at the beach in Massachusetts. He was in his little wheelchair on the beach, and Kelly's a big animal lover. And so she was like, "Oh
Yes.
my God, like your dog's so cute and what's going on?" And she was like, "You have to meet my friend Jackie. She's got blankets. They're going to help you." And so she got in touch with us. We went through the whole story. I sent her a blanket to try. And even in my head, knowing that the laser worked, I knew the red light therapy was going to work. But we are using LEDs in red light therapy instead of lasers. And so in my head, I thought, okay, he's been paralyzed for a year. The laser took a month to just even uncurl the legs. I'm thinking 45, 60 days before we're probably going to see some big differences. And I mean, Kara almost made me like pass out on the floor several times. Like she texted, I just told her, do the treatment. We did treatments twice a day for him because I wanted to hit him with a lot of light. And in 5 days, five, she texted me and she's like, Marley's standing. And I was like, shut
What?
up. Like I literally texted her and I was just like, shut up. What? And she's like, yeah, he's standing. And then in 10 days, he was still standing and taking like trying to take his first initial steps. And by day 14, he was already like wobbly and couldn't do it for long, but he was walking at 14 days. And this was September of last year. So like now, like she sends me videos all the time and he's like, he doesn't run or anything, but he's continued to get stronger. He shrunk half of his size back down to his normal body. He gets up on his own. He pees and poops on his own. He eats on his own. He plays with his toys, like back to having a regular life. And so it was just a miracle and just super powerful to see how well light therapy can help him. And so she did take him to the vet about a month and a half ago and just got new x-rays done just to see if like we could find something else.
Yeah.
And now that his inflammation had gone down, that vet did find out that he's got 4 herniated discs in his back, but they're inoperable. Even if they would have caught that back when he wasn't inflamed, that would have been a case where the doctor would have recommended euthanasia because he's paralyzed. We can't operate on those discs, and that dog would have lost his life. Everything happens for a reason, right? And so he was too inflamed, and she went through all the things she did, and then, of course, found dog soul. And now he's able to walk because of the red light therapy and the blanket, and he'll be able to just use that and have his life for however long he can. But now Kara didn't have to lose him and he didn't have to lose his life to be able to have at least some type of quality of life, until whenever he's not supposed to. So, yeah, that's Marley's little story. And I think it's just truly miraculous because there's a lot of dogs that deal with IVDD, which is like a vertebral disc, and a lot of it comes through certain breeding of breeds that we're doing now, like
Mm.
the French bulldogs, but a lot of like dachshunds and chihuahuas and like those smaller breeds, they'll have a lot of compression from jumping down or up on things, and they're just they're much more tinier through the spine, and so it's not quite as strong. But I think there's a lot of reasons, and we can get into that eventually with the quantum stuff of just like with the humans, we're breeding and we're having animals that are also being born weaker genetically and physiologically because of our indoor lifestyle and non-native EMFs and things like that that are in our environment, toxins, molds, over vaccinations, things like that that are weakening the body by weakening the mitochondria. And that's where we're starting to see these issues that now we do want to blame for genes, but as we know in the quantum field, the genes is only 20% at play, right? And they're the ones that load the gun, but really it's the environment that pulls the trigger. And, it is something with my company that I want to start some education soon to start actually talking about the mitochondria and our quantum environment around us, because there's really not any vets even on the holistic side that are talking about these particular environmental toxins. There are definitely holistic vets that talk about tap water and over vaccination and mold in food and kibble and things like that, but there's nobody talking about circadian rhythms and non-native EMFs and things that like we can't see that we know that aren't affecting us as well, but also obviously affecting our indoor, furry family members as well.
Yeah. And like you said, they can't really communicate to us what's going on. So even with your example with Marley, is it Morley or Marley?
Marley. Yeah, Marley.
Marley. Yeah. Man. And they could be in pain and we wouldn't know. And that makes me so sad. Um, but
Yeah.
even in my personal experience, we go on these wellness journeys. Kelly and I were just talking about how you start with plastic Tupperware, like you get rid of plastic Tupperware. That's the first step of like
Yeah.
your journey. And so I've been on my health journey for the past 5, 10 years. And just recently it hit me. I don't think kibble is good for the dog. right? My dog was having all these skin issues, and I was like, I think we got to change his food. And I tried to do the research. Should I make my own food? I did all the stuff. So, anyways, I ended up buying one of the services where they send you the fresh meals. Now, my dog is only 5 years old. He's still very much got a lot of life left. I mean, he has dropped weight. He looks amazing. He's acting like a puppy. And literally, we live an outdoor lifestyle. So he spends a lot of, like, he literally has a spot on the front porch that he lays all day, every day. You know, if we go on a boat ride, he's in the boat with us, on a jet ski with us. He literally lives an
Oh,
outdoor lifestyle. He walks a couple miles a day with us. And yet all we changed was the food. And all of a sudden, he's acting like a puppy again, chasing his toys around. And I was like, that's so crazy. It was just this, like, almost like intuitive. We want him to live longer, so we're not going to feed him dried food that doesn't have any water, right? So it was just crazy, that little change. And again, I guess if they could tell us, they would, but we often think of it like they're begging or whatever, but really it
uh-huh.
was he shouldn't have been on kibble. He should have been on fresh food, right? That's full of water, that's
Absolutely.
full of, hydration, all those types of things. So, well,
It
what?
goes back nature versus nurture again, like with any of our, even though we call them our pets and our family members and they are domesticated animals, they truly are wild animals at our genetics. And so are we as humans, even though it's hard for us humans to see and believe
Yes,
that anymore. But for dogs, they are carnivores and cats are carnivores and horses are omnivores and they're supposed to be eating different weeds and plants and meat and bones and organs. Most of our animals, including us as humans, don't get enough organs. And that's a well balanced meal. And even though sometimes I'm sure old timers would hate when you say things like this, but it's like, who wants to eat the same dry kibble like every single day? Like, you wouldn't want to eat the same, like, macaroni and cheese out of a box every single day. Like,
exactly.
we get to have that choice and we get to have that variety. And the animals out in their natural habitat would have had that. They also wouldn't have been eating as often. Same with us. We don't fast enough or don't limit some of our intake and allow the body to kind of like do more of its healing and fasting modalities in the body, like ketosis and things like that, to bring around like cancer killing properties. So the animals are the same, and like there's times I'll admit, like my dog sometimes will only get fed once a day. And, some people might be like, oh my God, you're starving your dog. But they eat really well. My dogs get sardines and they get raw eggs with the shell. And I'm not on a full raw diet anymore just because a lot of the companies got a little bit expensive for me, and I don't have a lot of the time yet to do it myself anymore with running a company. But they definitely eat, probably 80% whole foods, and they get marrow bones to chew on. And it's the same thing with horses. We see so many skin and gut issues, and like horses are literally eating grain, like it's processed um
Right.
food pellets, that they're getting like pounds and pounds and pounds of that. A lot of it sometimes, like on the racetrack, has like molasses and sugar and carbohydrates in it. And then you literally have this 2 or 3 year old like rocket of a wild horse, standing in a stall for 23 hours a day eating sugar. It's the equivalent of like when I want to go to the industry, which I'll have to find a more diplomatic way, obviously, to say it, but on podcast, it's fair game. But it's like if you had a kid, let's say you had a 5 year old, I don't know how old your kid is, but if you had a 5 year old and you stuck him in a closet all day that was dim lit, right? And you just fed him Skittles all day. And then for 1 hour a day, you told him to come out to the road and run as fast as he can, to the stop sign and back. What would his health look like? I mean, his nervous system would be an absolute wreck. His gut would be a wreck. He wouldn't have his circadian rhythm. So things would be all messed up there, which just messes up all the systems in the body. And then we wonder why our animals are getting sicker and sicker at younger and younger ages, just like the human counterparts that we're seeing on our side in our health.
Yeah, that does make sense. So, from my understanding, I thought horses spent all their time outdoors, but is that not correct?
Not on the performance side, like if you go out west in Colorado or Montana, oh man, I love those horses and the life they have. I'll drive by and there'll be a big open field and, 5, 10, 20 horses just munching on grass. And there's these huge, beautiful mountainscapes behind them, whether it's snowing and 20 below zero or 80 degrees during the summer, and I'm like, man, y'all got the life, you have no idea. And then if you go to more of the performance side of things, which is where my business has been for 15 years, they are in stalls a good portion of their time. And I am speaking in generalization, but on average now that's just what we've decided to do because space and time and convenience. And then also obviously like high performance athletes are expensive, especially when it comes to
Right.
being an animal. And so you have thoroughbred racehorses that are $1 million, $3 million, a show jumper that's $100,000 horse, and they want to bubble wrap them because again, they're wild horses. They can go out and break a leg tomorrow and die. Like you don't have a
Right.
leg, you don't have a horse. And so I do understand, of course, that concept of like you have money tied into this thing and it's an investment and you're wanting to compete. But still, at the end of the day, it is a living, breathing, sentient being that is a wild animal that needs movement and sunshine and water and friends and forage. And honestly, if most people would turn their horses out more, they would fix 90% of the problems that they're spending so much money on supplements and injections and therapy blankets and all those things. And even though that's something that I'm creating, it'll be something we still educate people on about circadian rhythms and light because my blankets are still not going to replace the sun, right? That's never going to happen. There will never be a man-made device that replaces the sun. However, my devices, the modern world's not going anywhere. There's not going to be
Right.
times when people can't keep their dogs inside most of the day, or horses the same in the performance side. And at least with coming up with something like I have, it does allow for a supplement and a therapy that truly works, is easy access to. There's no side effects or damage that can be caused, which is one of the biggest things with red light therapy that you can give to people. And it truly works and fast. And light is the strongest, powerful, most natural energy that we have in the existence of the universe. So it's better than anything out there. So it really is the ultimate supplement that you could bring into the barn or into your home. And I've always thought it's curious, and I didn't really think about this too much until getting into the quantum information. But when you compare the sad gloom statistics that we have of the pet industry versus humans, it's very similar, right? Like 1 in 2 dogs are going to come down with cancer. 1 in 3 cats are going to come down with cancer. 60% of cats are obese.
Wow.
50% of dogs are obese. 40% of horses are obese. Is obese.
Wow.
Okay. You would not see that in the wild. Metabolic issues, like they have something called Cushing's on the animal side that's just like diabetes for humans. And so all of these modern diseases that the animals are getting, and I think it truly has to do with this indoor lifestyle. Now, what's funny is if you look at the cancer rates of horses, it's very slim. Not that they don't get cancer, because it does happen, and especially like white-skinned or gray-skinned horses will have more like of the melanomas and
Mhm.
sarcomas, these like tumors that will come up. And I think it's because of the skin color, and that's been proven in the science. But if you look at that compared to like our indoor domesticated animals, even though horses are spending a majority of their time in the stall, I equate it to they're still technically outside. So they're not like in a building with like
Right.
manufactured air and mold and toxins. They're still usually touching the earth, even if it's in like a dirt
Right.
stall. So they're still getting the free electrons from the earth. They're getting fresh air, even if it's in a dim lit barn. So nobody has kind of like put that, connection together. And it's, well, why do you think that horses haven't gotten cancer versus dogs and cats? Like they're getting vaccinated, they're getting processed foods, they're getting crap tap water. And what's the difference there? I truly think it's because of the indoor lifestyle and the broken circadian rhythms. Most horses are still going to get a fairly good balance of light and dark because of what their environment is, even being stabled. And I think that's where they have probably a little bit better intact circadian rhythms than like our cats and our dogs that are inside the house.
So, would you recommend red light therapy for your household pet? Or is that something if like if they were having any kind of health issues, it would be a go-to, or what would your recommendation be?
It's it's both, honestly, because we now are to the point, just like on the human side, where we've lived indoors for long enough that all of the new generations do have weaker genetics, unfortunately. So it's something that if you can get people to understand this process of the light and the indoor lifestyles, I would totally recommend it as even just a preventative method because modern life isn't going anywhere. And so everybody is so deficient in red and near infrared light. So when we do learn about that coming from the sunlight, that's not the only place that we get red and near infrared from. Everything that's living outside, so your trees, your bushes, your other animals, grass, water, it all actually absorbs and then reflects near infrared. And that's the wavelength that can actually penetrate up to 50 millimeters into your tissue, even through clothes and everything. And so we're all deficient in that by not living outside anymore or surrounding yourself by trees and bushes and plants and all of that. And so our animals are lacking that as well. So that's already like they're already coming into the world deficient. And so, of course, using the red light therapy would be great just to say this is going to be the ultimate supplement to allow your dogs to have longevity and quality of life. And then, absolutely, if there's an actual disease or diagnosis or an injury, 100%. I don't honestly like, I know I'm biased because now I have a red light therapy company, but they don't have to pick mine. I just think that red light is actually the best modality to choose. And you can still stack it on top of other modalities. Like in the equine performance world, we do a lot of joint injections, just like they'll do on human
Mhm.
athletes in the knee or in the ankle. And there's research now that shows if you're doing any type of like stem cell, PRP, or steroid injection, stacking it with red light therapy immediately afterwards actually enhances the efficacy rate by like from like 60% to 90%, I think is in the paper. So that's huge. You know, you could use the red light on its own, I believe, as well, but there's going to be some cases where there's like really nasty arthritis or maybe a bone spur or something like that, and you're still going to need the injection. And so you can do the injection and then you can do the red light afterwards, and you're still just going to get that double stack of therapy. And again, it's non-invasive. There's no overdosing you can do, there's no damage, which versus lasers, which are also red light therapy, and that's what's been around since the late 60s. Lasers are $30,000 and up. I mean, I've seen some on the track that are like 80 grand. And
Yeah.
so they work and you don't have to be on a spot as long. But again, you're only doing an isolated area. They're expensive and they can cause damage to the tissue if you don't know what you're doing. So you do normally need like a medical professional, you know, a veterinarian or a doctor or a chiropractor. And so it becomes just like with Marley's story, it becomes inconvenient to see that person that often for the treatment and then very expensive because each treatment costs. You know, the blanket that Marley needed is $375. So that's already like a session and a half of what she was paying for the
Right.
laser treatment that wasn't working even as fast because she couldn't get it every day. And so that's where I just think this will really come in as a good um, solution to people that can bring this therapy now home safely and not have to worry about causing harm. But yeah, I think it can be used for preventative, also for a diagnosis, and also for rehab and performance enhancement, actually.
Yeah, and what's interesting, what just came to me as you were talking, is we already know that like cuddling with our animals like creates infrared heat, which also expands
Yeah.
your exclusion zone water, right, in your body. And
Yes.
so for me, what kind of came up was just imagining my dog having this like warm red blanket on, like it would be comforting to him as well, right? So I was like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I bet he would love that.
The animals just love it because also, you know, animals are actually more sensitive than us as humans. They don't have like the whole monkey brain up here going on. And so, and, you know, for most animals, not excluding dogs because they're predators, but like horses are prey animals, other animals are prey animals, but even predator and prey, like if you go back to that primal piece, they're always surrounding and checking in with their environment, right? And that's why they're herd and pack animals, right? Because they're communicating with each other with their energetic quantum fields. So we'll get to this point that you wanted to bring up today. And so they're just more sensitive because they're more aware and present in this exact second and moment to their
Mm.
environment. And so when the red light hits them, I don't know if you've seen some of the posts we've made, we call it the red light melt in the company because it's a 15-minute session, which is also super user friendly and accessible. But within like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes of that 15-minute session, I mean, their eyes are starting to lower and they're licking and chewing and they're yawning. And my dog now, like, he just knows what the blanket is. And so I put it on him and he just plops and lays down and like just sleeps for the 15 minutes to enjoy the session. So it goes all the way into that cellular level and into the mitochondria, right? And it taps into the parasympathetic nervous system for that rest and digest part, not the fight or
Mm.
flight of the sympathetic nervous system. It taps into that rest and digest. So it's just going in and telling the natural healing processes that we have in the body to turn on and to work more efficiently and quicker. And so that's what it's kind of doing. But when we talk about kind of even the hugging, and like you said, that it's releasing that warmth and that near infrared, you're also getting all of those releases of like oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin, and those are released from the gut, right? And so like our blankets have a patented design of a belly band. Like nobody had thought about doing that in their therapeutic blankets. And there's so much on the ventral line that we forget about. You know, the gut and the microbiome is right there, and the near infrared can penetrate that deep. You have lungs and heart and intestines that it can affect. But I digress. I wanted to get to the point that you wanted to talk
Yeah.
about with the energy fields. Because it is cool to know that about, you know, animals and humans. We learn in the quantum field that humans have an energetic field that comes out from our heart up to 6 feet in distance. And I think dogs are around 8 to 10, if I can remember the research, but horses have an energetic field up to 20 feet. And
Whoa.
that's again because usually they're in a much bigger space. They have usually a herd of themselves around. And that's why, like, one horse could be finally laying down and sleeping on the ground, which is a super vulnerable position for them. And the other horses are kind of, you know, surrounded in a circle with some space. But the minute, you know, let's say a coyote came through the woods or something, another horse is going to spook and start moving. And then that horse that's laying down is going to get up, and they can all feel that, you know? And so, even on the healing side of things, that's where horses can truly affect us. So, if you think of even coming in 20 feet within a horse, they are already sensing your energetic feel. They can tell what your emotions are, how you're feeling, if you're sick, if you're upset, like whatever we're putting off in our field, whether it's an illness or a bad mood or any of that, they're able to read and recognize that. I think that's why animals have been used for healing for a very long time. You know, we have dogs that are obviously PTSD service dogs and, you know, military dogs and things like that. But even on the horse side, there's a whole increase of equine therapy that's coming around now that is incredible for veterans with PTSD. There's a couple of organizations actually where I live here in Louisiana. We have two or three, and they work with the military for PTSD groups. They work with a sex trafficking group of women. They work with disabled children that have either like autism or physical disabilities or mental disabilities. And then they also work with like trauma cases. And it's amazing to see where like talk therapy, which is kind of like the generalized version of therapy that everybody has to use nowadays in those types of cases, have not worked, you know, and then they're given drugs and all of these things, and none of that is working. The horses are working, and like fast, really quick responses from children that like stop talking from like a traumatic event, and then they spend 3 sessions with a horse and they start talking again. You know, kids with physical disabilities where they can really start moving more and starting getting more motor skills from just sitting up on top of a horse and moving around an arena with them. It really truly is. They're very healing, amazing animals that have decided to join this life with us because they're very powerful. They don't have to do anything really that we, you know, force them to do. And so it's a beautiful thing to see such a large, powerful animal that has decided to join this world with us and do things with us because it's just it's fun, of course, the things that they do out in competition and in the wild, but it's very neat to have that connection with a horse.
So, were you one of those little girls that wanted a pony growing up?
Yeah, and I never got one. um, it's amazing how life really does work out the way it does. I mean, none of my family members were into horses or anything. I have a woman Cherokee chief as like a great grandmother. And that's the only thing I can think of is like all of my love for animals and nature and horses and leather and drums and gemstones. Like I can just keep thinking like that must all be coming from like my native, you know, bloodline.
Ancestral.
Yeah, because yeah, I was just a little girl that always loved horses and jumped on any of them to go and ride with them. And I'm a little more cautious now about jumping on
Yeah.
any horse. You know, I ask them for permission to touch them at all anymore because, you know, all of our animals should really be able to have that consent. But yeah, been a horse lover my whole life. And once it's in your blood, like it's always in your blood. You never get rid of it.
We were up in upstate New York last summer. We went camping with like a little family reunion. And
Nice.
some of our family rides horses. And so they took all the kids out riding one day and they did this trail. And my kids talked about that day for months on end. Like they
Yeah.
loved riding horses so much. So we're going to do it again this upcoming summer as well. But
Yay.
I said, I think this time I'm going to go with you guys. I'm going to see what this is all about because I've been reading of all the healing properties of horses. So that is just so fascinating. And I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think every animal person, like you need consent in order to touch them. And I remember when I had my first child too. It's I very much when I brought her home, I was like, let me show you around our house. And I introduced the house to her, right? And I would introduce every person that came in and and all that stuff. Because I mean, we're all spiritual beings at the end of the day, and we can read other
Yeah,
people's energy and we can feel if there's heavy feelings in the room, you can feel that something is off. And I
for
think
sure.
we've just kind of been taught to ignore that intuition for so long. And
Yeah.
so hopefully now I feel like we're kind of getting some of that back and not calling it as woo woo because I mean it is our spiritual gifts. It's our divine right to have those spiritual
A
gifts.
hundred- Yeah, it's 100%. I'm all for it. And if I can help lead the way in any way I can, I'm here for it.
Awesome. Well, I will be seeing you at Meat Stock this year,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you're also going to be coming to the Return to Nature retreat in
Yes.
June.
I'm
I'm
so excited about that.
so excited. It's going to be amazing. We are in the final 2 months planning all the small details, and it's going to
Yeah.
be really, truly wonderful. Are you going to be at any other events this year, or where else can people
Yeah.
find
Well,
you?
I go to some, like horse shows and dog shows that are more of like your traditional like agility dog show or like a horse jumping horse show or an eventing show or dressage show or something. So there's a few of those that are kind of coming up for like the fall. But May and June are definitely going to be very big for like my first kind of like big rocket launchers type of shows, which is including the Quantum Health Retreat with you and Carrie. But like the second week of May, I'm going to Dr. Judy's Natural Vet Holistic Conference in Orlando. Dr. Judy's been a holistic veterinarian for small animals, I think for, gosh, 20 or close to 30 years. And she's all over YouTube now and comes up with, all natural diets and medicines and plants and all that. And she's having her first kind of big like conference as well. And she's bringing vets in from Australia and the UK and Canada and other parts of the United States to be speakers. And so we get to be there as vendors as well. And there'll be other vet students and the public there. So I'm super excited about those connections. And then right after that, I'll be at Meat Stock with you in Gatlinburg. So I'm excited for that as well. And then right after that, I'm actually going to be at the Dave Asprey Biohacking Conference in Austin. And that's going to be just crazy.
I'll be there
Um,
too.
are you going to that
Yeah.
too? Awesome. You're going to all the things. That's awesome. That's going to be, I mean, long, busy, crazy days, but I mean, what an event. And I feel so honored to be there. They were really excited to have me because they've never had like a purely pet product in the quantum space there for the biohacking. So we're really excited about that. And it's a pet friendly event. So like we're offering like
Oh,
free dog sessions. If somebody brings their dog, you can bring them over and we'll give them a free red light therapy session. And that's usually how you sell them because, people see the dog loving it and like falling asleep and the red light melt. And it's like, okay, I need one for my dogs. That'll be a lot of fun to show off. And then in June, right before I come to the quantum retreat, there's a big working dog from the Working Dog magazine. There's a big working dog conference in Nashville the week leading right up to the quantum retreat. And so I'm excited about that one too, because I think it'll just give more connections to just the dog industry in general. But the working dog industry is huge as far as like service dogs for military individuals, but also the dogs that actually do, bomb sniffing and military work where they're jumping out of helicopters and like on war
yes.
ground zones and they get injured and they work 6 days a week and it's high stress. And so it would be great to be able to connect with some type of, military contract or something like that to be able to get this is such an easy, accessible, again, like non-invasive treatment that can really help those animals. And so I'm very excited for that conference as well. And then after that, we'll see what happens in the fall. There's a couple of vet conferences and some other horse shows and stuff that I'd like to attend and be at.
I read a statistic at one point, and I'm going to fundamentally get this wrong, but it was something like people spend more money on their dogs than they do their children or something like
Yeah, I mean, I think we have definitely gotten ourselves in society to a place where rightly so, my dogs are my kids, they're my family. I don't know if I would spend more money on them than like everything else because I've got to keep myself healthy to be able to
Yes.
take care of them, right? But
Yes.
I mean, I try to take them everywhere I can with me and they definitely have a very good life. But yeah, the pet industry is a multi-billion dollar industry. And so, yeah, people have gotten just crazy about it, collars and jackets and all the things, but yeah, I think it's good. I mean, animals bring so much healing and so much, unconditional love and that oxytocin when we think about how individualized and how society is in a lot of like solitude now. And
Hmm.
that's a whole nother podcast interview, I'm sure, of
Yes.
why and what's been happening. But thank God, at least we have animals then that can bring that comfort and that oxytocin and that love. I mean, for me, I am single right now. And so I have the two dogs and I'm working two businesses at the moment and growing this company. And I mean, if I didn't have my dogs to come home to, I'd probably be in a loony bin right now, So I'm very grateful and thankful to them for that. But yeah, it's a huge industry. I'm glad that the pet industry has grown. I mean, I love that people have that love for animals and want to have them in their life because they're definitely very special.
Yeah, I can't remember 5 years ago when we bought our dog. I think it was I was reading David Sinclair's book on longevity or something, and it talked about how if you have a dog or a cat, that it expands your lifespan. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes, we're doing that.
Yeah. Well, I've already always told people, I'm like, well, before I started the company, I was like, if I win the lottery, you'll know. But also,
Yes.
even with like the success of the company, I'm like, my end goal is to have land and a farm. And because I didn't get to have it as a kid, right? So, like, I want the full
Yes.
farm, like cows and goats and chickens and
Yes.
whatever dogs want to show up. Like, I will be that house and that property of just like all the animals, all the time. I mean, I love to sit down and just watch animal behavior. It's more fun than Netflix. Like I know I'm just that weirdo, but I think they're fantastic. It's super fun and enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, let's do a compound. We'll do a little homestead. We'll watch the animals when
Yes.
each other travel and
I think that would be great. I've talked to a couple of friends. There's definitely some serious talks about it because, again, in modern society, we've gotten to this point where I do think people are starting to value that type of lifestyle that we do call more simple and outside of the cities. But also, if you've never lived it, is a lot of work and there's always something
Mhm.
to be done. And if you have livestock or if you have animals, like you don't get to leave very often. And for me, like that homestead and that farm is like heaven. So I'm okay.
You don't need to
I can
go
stay
anywhere
forever.
else. Well,
But
and
again, it is always work. And we used to have, a husband and a wife and like 11 kids, to
exactly.
help. And so
Yep.
it's not quite like that anymore. And your whole family, lived in the property around you. So everybody could help out. And we've kind of lost that tribal community. And although it doesn't have to be your blood family by any means, I think a commune idea is fantastic because then all that pressure and all that work doesn't come down to just like a couple. Everybody can kind of help out and shift and eat meals together and gather together. Like we're lacking that so much in this modern society. And so I'm down for that.
So I grew up in Russia and we lived in a situation where it was like
Oh,
one big house, but it was like a community house. So like each family had a room or two, and then there was a communal kitchen and the chores were split and you could, anybody could parent any of the children. There was
oh,
people who cooked meals on certain days and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, I could definitely go back to that type of lifestyle. I mean, I don't
I
really
like that.
remember it. I was very young, but just from the stories that I've heard from my family. But, I mean, my grandparents, so I still have, well, no, two out of my four grandparents. One just passed a couple years ago, but she was in her late 80s. My
Mhm.
grandparents are like late 80s, early 90s now. My great grandmother lived till 94. But these people worked outside in the farmland with the animals day
Yep.
and night, in their
Yep.
gardens. I mean, they did everything outside, spent all their time outdoors.
Yeah.
And I have to think, I'm like, yeah, I attribute that to them being outside. I mean, my family
Oh,
was
100%.
tan, right? Like you wouldn't know it right now with how white I am after this winter. But by the end of summer, I am dark, dark. You kind of look back on ancestrally, what were they doing right? They were eating real meals, real food, raising their own food. Their animals were getting their kitchen scraps, so they weren't getting fed,
Yep.
processed food. We butchered our own animals. I remember raising lambs and then that would be dinner. Like,
Yep. Don't
um,
name it.
nope, nope. Um, but yeah, just going back to the ancestral way of life, really. Then I also
Yeah.
wonder, could I really do it? I don't know.
Well, right now with us having businesses, we can't, but
Right.
I'm hoping to be able
Yeah.
to get rid of this phone over here one day soon.
Yes.
I really, but no, I mean, technology is great. It still allows you to, obviously keep in touch with your family, but that is something they also had besides just the outside stuff. And it's something I've learned with the quantum. You get so fixated on like what's got to be outside and the nature and the whole foods. Well, you can be doing all of those things perfectly if you don't have any community, like you don't have any, touch and intimacy and love, and whether it's with an animal or, people, but really people as well, we are social animals as well, you're going to suffer. And so I've also come to realize like it can't just all be, all quantum and all business. You also have to
100%.
get outside the house and go be community and with people and do things. And that's just as important, if not more than important. You hear these stories of people that do live into their 90s and they drank every night and ate dark chocolate every day
Yes.
and smoked cigarettes. And granted, they were still usually from that generation outside and much more active and
Yes.
didn't have as much of a toxic environment as us, right? But they usually were like, yeah, we hung out with, our neighbors every Thursday and then we had family dinner every Sunday.
Yes.
And so they had that love and oxytocin, and man, that's a good drug. It's a good hormone for us. And so I think that's super important as well.
Well, so our mutual friend Jim, I have a podcast coming out with him, and he said
Right.
to me, he goes, yeah, I moved to the equator, and he goes, it didn't fix all my health problems, and it didn't fix, in fact, like it hurt me. I got removed myself from the community that I had, and he was
Yep.
just so open and so vulnerable in his share about how he thought if he just fixed his light environment and moved to the equator, that everything would kind of go right. And he's like,
Yep.
don't do that. Don't remove yourself from the community. And so
No,
thankfully
and
we
don't
have
always force
technology.
your
Yeah.
and don't always force yourself on like just that one idealism. I think all of us quantum people kind of started from some of those initial extreme ideas, and you do think that. And I've been to Mexico and done the whole sun thing, and I live in Louisiana right now. But to be honest, because of who my ancestors are, which are mainly German and like from the Czechoslovakia area, I have a lighter skin tone and blue eyes. And so my ancestors were used to probably higher latitude and cold weather. And I now realize, like, by going out and visiting Colorado a lot the last few years, like, I feel fantastic out there.
There.
Like, love the dry cold, love the high altitude. I mean, obviously, the scenery and horses are a big part of it. But as far as the climate, you keep thinking, like, well, but I have to be closer to the sun and I have to be down at the equator. Now, being in Louisiana for as long as I have been, the last 3 summers have been so hard on me with the humidity. Like, I get heavy and I get swollen and I just feel miserable. And we just don't get enough of a cold break here at all. I mean, I will say this year we finally had snow for the first time in 7 years, but that was even just a blip. If you think about like all the months of winter, we had like 2 weeks of like snow and some really cold weather, and like that was it. And compared to all the heat and humidity we have, I'm like, my haplotype is not built for this to have this 24/7. Yeah, take a vacation to Mexico. Yeah, go to Florida for some time, but like I actually think my body will thrive better, granted, with still having community and good water and light
Right.
life and all that. I think my genes and haplotype will be happier out west, which is where I'm eventually headed. And I'm excited to even try that science experiment because even now that I know everything with quantum, it's not like I'm going to go to the cold and then just shut myself inside. Like I'm going to get
Exactly.
outside and get all that cold exposure and the high altitude to the sun. And so like breathing in that, less oxygenated air, like that just pumps up your system. And I love it. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, and it's funny that you're talking about that because I was raised in Russia, lots of snow, lots of cold weather, and I love an ice bath. Like I plunge almost every single day. And I thrive in that. And I know they say, oh, women shouldn't be, we're not having that conversation here today. But
Yeah.
for me, I love it. And I'm starting to think, as you were talking, I'm like, maybe it's because of where my heritage is from. Like we were
Yep.
exposed to really, really cold winters.
100%. We just can't box ourselves into these idealistic, things. Like, yes, we know we are diurnal animals. We need a circadian rhythm of 12 on, 12 off, of light and dark-ish. But really, if you can think about kind of where you came from and then gender as well, obviously women don't deal with stress as much as men. But then I think those three things, the light and then like where you're from, your gender and realizing hormones and cycles and stuff if you're a woman versus a man, and then, community, and make sure you're not in solitude. I think you're going to do just fine in life, even if you have some chocolate or some dog food. Or use your phone for the day. Like, I think you're going to be fine. We can't be, stress will kill you before anything kills you. So if you're over worried about something, you can't do it. So.
Yes. Awesome. Well, let the listeners know how they can find you and your products.
Thank you. Well, if they do want to ever hear any more interviews from me, I do have quite a few interviews and podcast interviews online. Some are for animals, some are even just like Light Shapes Life, kind of quantum health basics and trying to break it down super easy. But as far as the company goes, we have a website. You can find that at www.equisol. And then we have an Instagram and Facebook page under Equisol as well. And we're usually sharing, education on red light therapy or animal nutrition or case studies that we've been healing because we've been really doing a lot of work there. And yeah, our email address and all that kind of stuff is on the website. Our website has tons of pictures on all the products along with the pricing. We've got some scientific articles on there. I really want to pride myself in running and presenting a company that is full transparency with integrity. We put all of our tech specs, wavelengths, non-native EMS. We have 0 non-native EMS because all of our products are battery operated, and all of that kind of stuff. And you can write with any questions, and I will try to answer those as best to my ability. And I believe in that because we're in also a predicament of capitalistic industries where it's just, make a buck and sell this and sell that, even if it's the new trend. And all red light therapy really will work and help you. I'll always push that as well. But there are some dangers and some risks if you're buying something that maybe hasn't been tested or just thrown on the market cheaply with not really thinking of how everything works in the body. And so, not to say you have to buy from our company, but I have worked on the research and certifications and continue to try to read all the new up and coming research and different things that we can do to provide the safest and most healthiest product for your animal.
I love it. Beautiful. Well, I always end every podcast with the same question. So I'd like to offer this up to you is what does love mean to you?
It's not a short answer either. I know that most people think that love is a feeling, and obviously, love is an emotion. It's in there with joy and happiness and all the different emotions we can express, and those are coming at you with a certain frequency and vibration that you give out. But truly, I think for most of us, when we experience love in all kinds of different contexts, it's truly like a choice. It's a verb. And you choose to still love something or someone, especially someone if you're talking about interpersonal relationships. When some days you don't feel like doing that, or even with your pets. When you talk about the longevity, I think people live longer with pets not only because the pet gives them oxytocin and serotonin, but like you have a responsibility of something to get up every day and take care of it because you love it. Like, what would you do without that? There'd be no reason to do that. And so I truly think that love presents that just highest frequency that we can give and receive from everything around us. Honestly, like I love trees and birds and animals and people. And so when you see it in that perspective, it can just make you feel really good. And I actually, after you asked me the question, I want to flip around and just share that when I meet new people in my life, and usually like if they're going to be a new friend or a romantic interest or whatever, but if they're going to be in my life, I like to always ask them the question, why do you think we're here as human
Mm,
beings? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to, because sometimes people want time to think about it. But I always like that question because number one, it's provocative, it's thought, seeking. And if they don't know, then that means they haven't thought about it, which is fine. There's no right or I always tell them like there's no
yeah.
right or wrong answer. And if you don't know or you haven't thought about it, like that's cool too. But it gives me a lot of feedback of like, are they critical thinkers? Are they curious? Have they thought about like why the heck are we here? And so everybody has their own answers, and I love getting the different answers. But in conjunction with your question, when people ask me what my answer is I say that we're here to love and be loved.
Mm,
Because whether you're here even creating an invention, and that's the only thing you do, like if you think about some of the super smart philosophers or inventors in our time, sometimes they didn't have a family or marriage or kids or
Right.
animals. Like they just had their one like creation, but that was their love. Like that was their gift that they were given, that they loved so much they had to see it come to fruition, you know. And then you have people, yeah, they have 8 kids, you know, because they love having a family and they love having kids, or you know, they have that partner for life that they work hard. So I just think there's lots of reasons of how you can experience and see love, but I truly think that's what we're here for, is to give that and also to receive it and feel it. And it comes in so many different methods and forms and versions. And I think that's like the most beautiful thing about our human experience here.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry.
So
That was so beautiful.
you'll have to think about that and tell me an answer when I
No,
see you
I'll
in person. I'll
tell
see
you
you
now.
again.
I mean, yeah, I met my husband when I was 18. I came from a very abusive household, and we go to date nights every Monday night. We were sitting at dinner last night, and I said to him, I said, "You really saved me. I think that you were put on this earth because you saved me." And he goes, "No, that might have been the case in the beginning because but he said in the last few years you've saved me. You've been here to help me reach my highest purpose, and we both have just grown exponentially with together as individuals but also together in our relationship, helping each other reach our highest potential." And it's such a cool way to look at like this mission that we're here, you know, to fulfill whatever attributes and journeys we wanted to fulfill in this lifetime, and do it with our soul family and the people who came on this journey with us. But it's so cool
Yeah.
to see and be seen as like, I know he's truly helped me in this lifetime on my path to become the best person that I can be, the highest version of myself, but also for him to feel the same way that I've been able to reflect that and mirror that for him and his journey and his path too. It's just been really beautiful to watch. So I loved your
Oh, you're gonna
answer,
make me
your
cry
question.
now. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. No, that was
Yeah.
beautiful. And that is love, being seen and heard, right, for who you are, which you're love. And it's always changing too. So to make it as long as you guys have and to be together from 18, like that's a lot of transitions and changes from an 18-year-old, you know? So that's beautiful. Congrats.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I always say, he doesn't try to change me in any way. I am who I am, and he loves me unconditionally. And I wish that kind of love for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, love that.
Uh,
Yay. Well, thank you so
oh,
much, Oksana, for
thank
having
you.
me. It's a great podcast, and it was a great way to be introduced virtually. And then I will get to see you and give you a big, huge hug
I
very soon in
know. I'm
person.
so
So
excited. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Quantum Lens podcast. I hope this episode brought you insight, inspiration, and a deeper connection to your journey. If you've loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, keep aligning, expanding, and embrace the magic of who you are.